Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you here this afternoon and thank you for coming. Despite the beautiful weather, we'll have plenty of interesting things going on here too, though. The program this afternoon is generously supported by the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art. Since the opening of our new galleries in November, this foundation has allowed the Metropolitan Museum to bring in a wide range of speakers and performers to highlight and help us appreciate the objects on view even better, and to help us understand the themes which link the spaces and the wonderful diversity of culture from the regions represented in the galleries for the art of the Arab lands, Turkey, Iran, Central Asia, and later South Asia. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Christiane Gruber, this afternoon. She is going to talk about the Praiseworthy One, Devotional Images of the Prophet Muhammad in Islamic Traditions. Dr. Gruber is Associate Professor of Islamic Art at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Her primary field of research is Islamic book arts, paintings of the Prophet Muhammad, and ascension tales and images. She has authored 2 books and edited a volume of articles on ascension text and images. She also pursues research in Islamic book arts and painting, having authored the online catalog of Islamic calligraphy in the Library of Congress, and also she edited a volume of articles entitled The Islamic Manuscript Tradition. At the moment, she's writing her next book, entitled The Praiseworthy One, The Prophet Muhammad in Islamic Texts and Images. Her research has been supported by a number of grants, including the Max Planck Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, the Council on Library and Information Resources, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the American Research Institute in Turkey, the American Institute of Iranian Studies, the American Research Center in Egypt, and Fulbright Hays. It takes a lot of support to be able to work on these subjects, and luckily she's found it. Over the past decade, Christy has done extensive research in Islamic art history and in collections in America, Europe, Egypt, Turkey, and Iran. She has taught courses in art history at Humboldt University in Berlin, Indiana University, the University of Pennsylvania, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And from 2008 to 2010, she served as a board member of the Historians of Islamic Art Association, as well as editor of the scholarly listserv H Islam Art. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome Christy to the stage and thank her for being here.
Thank you so much, especially Sheila, for welcoming me today, and especially the curatorial team here at the Met for always keeping such an open door for researchers who pursue continued ongoing research over the years, especially for me with your paintings of the Prophet Muhammad. It gives me a special pleasure today to be here because my love and my passion for Islamic art began here when I was an intern 15 years ago. So without further ado, let me begin my talk today, which concerns devotional images of the Prophet Muhammad in Islamic traditions. Notwithstanding the widely held assumption that representations of human beings are forbidden in Islam, figural images nevertheless have played an important role within Islamic cultural and artistic traditions from the 8th century to today. From kings and maidens painted in frescoes on the walls of early palaces and bathhouses in the Arab Middle East, to kingly figures in audience or at battle as depicted in medieval ceramics, to early modern Persian and Turkish illustrated manuscripts boasting extensive pictorial programs, images of human beings have fulfilled a number of functions for both private and public audiences. At times, such images could act as mirrors into contemporary social and religious circumstances, while at others they could provide wishful projections of political and amorous conquest. Regardless of their different media and viewing contexts in different times and places, such depictions pay tribute to man's urge to visualize his world in his own image. Within the history of Islamic pictorial arts, images of the Prophet Muhammad likewise have played a significant role in the construction of identity for both members of ruling political elites as well as participants in a variety of faith communities. Many paintings of Muhammad were produced especially between 1300 and 1600, a period of major political and religious transition across the Islamic world. During this time, a number of powerful Turco-Persian dynasties emerged, claiming a sacred mandate to imperial rule thanks to their adherence to and promotion of the Islamic faith. In their symbolic formulations of rightful rulership, royal patrons and artists were clearly inspired by the model of the Prophet, who was portrayed in both texts and images as a divinely anointed monarch and archetypal ruler worthy of emulation. Although Muhammad was indeed a mortal man and temporal ruler emerging in the full light of history, it is widely believed that his prophetic rank and his proximity to God nevertheless endowed him with transtemporal dimensions and superhuman abilities, including the capacity to receive revelation, to perform miracles, to ascend into the heavens, and to speak with God directly and without intermediary. For these reasons, Muhammad also was imagined through a variety of symbolic abstractions, in particular light analogies, that aimed to promote his pre-existential nature and his ability to spread enlightenment to mankind through his unequaled access to the realm of the divine. Through such metaphors, Muhammad was deemed as the ultimate source of authority and spirituality, and hence was deployed as a point of reference within discourses on religious and political supremacy, as well as envisaged as an ideal conduit to experiencing the heavenly realms as found within mystical or Sufi practices of devotional contemplation. These many images of Muhammad as a mortal ruler, a radiant messenger, a pivot of truth, and a channel for unity with God reveal the divergent ways in which he could be imagined in the eyes of his beholders, depending on need and circumstance. And what is more, such mental images took on a distinctive visual turn as patrons and artists alike turned to the expressive power of the visual mode in order to craft and communicate a vision of a prophetic past within the lens of the present. Although 2 or 3 paintings of Muhammad dating to the first half of the 13th century are still extant today, the story of images of the Prophet begins in earnest around 1300, that is, after the Mongol conquests of Eurasia and the sacking of the Abbasid library in Baghdad in 1258. Although it is impossible to know what, if any, depictions of the Prophet might have been included in manuscript holdings of the famous library, what is nevertheless clear is that paintings of Muhammad began to appear in illustrated manuscripts that were commissioned by the political elites who ruled in the wake of the Mongol invasions. Having settled in Arab, Persian, and Turkic lands, and largely embraced the Islamic faith by 1300, these cultured patrons became some of the greatest supporters of the arts of the book, through which the biography of the Prophet and early Islamic history could be taught and passed down through generations of believers. Images of Muhammad, especially those produced in Persian lands, were not intended as mere visual aids in the supposedly objective narration of history. To the contrary, they promoted the Prophet as a repository of historic continuity and as an argument in favor of indigeneity and traditionalism for an otherwise foreign ruling class that sought to construct a corporate sense of superiority and legitimacy. For these reasons, the earliest surviving images of the Prophet depict him according to visual models that promote temporal authority and sacred rulership. This is the case for the painting shown here on the screen, which is included at the very beginning of Al-Varavini's Marzuban Name, or Book of the Margrave, made in Baghdad in 1299. And the Book of the Margrave comprises a collection of moralizing tales written in Persian. Along with figural portraits of the text's author and his royal patron, the painting of the prophet on the screen is only one of 3 illustrations in the manuscript, all of which essentially form part of the text's prologue, praising both regal and authorial excellence. Turning to a detail of this painting here. Although the painting was the target of a later iconoclastic act, the prophet was originally depicted with visible facial features. He sits cross-legged and enthroned, wearing his large white overcloak, known as a burda, over a blue robe. 2 flying angels, whose faces have been scratched out as well, fly above him while holding a fluttering ribbon. The angel on the right appears to pour light rays upon Muhammad, while the angel on the left seems to anoint him with a flask containing heavenly liquid or scent. Other figures sit or stand around the prophet. However, as is the case for the prophet himself, their faces, and in particular their eyes, have been damaged at a later date as well. The Persian text, immediately above and below the image, describes the prophet as emitting radiance, much like a torch of light, and his 2 sandals as exuding the minty smell of the pennyroyal or black polyherb. In following the text, the angels above him imbue him with the dual synesthetic attributes of numinous brilliance and fragrant aroma, adding a layer to the prophet's features otherwise not visible upon first glance. The petaled flowers and leaves in the foreground, moreover, may represent 2 pennyroyal flowers and thus offer a more olfactory evocation of Muhammad's prophetic aroma, itself praised in the author's text as quote-unquote a perfumed earth. Even though the painting's composition and corresponding text suggests that the prophet's inner essence, perfumed and radiant, can be a subject of praise and mental picturing, it also pays heed to his more observable features. Indeed, Muhammad's features are extolled in the 2 lines of poetry below the painting, which are right here, which read, quote, "Peace of God every morning and day upon such characteristics and features, peace upon the mystic who, in longing, rocks from the right to the left." Based on the Persian text and the inserted Arabic poem in honor of the prophet, it is possible to suggest that this painting is intended to depict Muhammad among his companions who sit or stand in meditation of his non-corporeal attributes. The men's postures hint that they are engaged in spiritual reflection and in active prayer. Indeed, they all seem to look up towards a vision of the prophet, himself rendered sacrosanct by the angels hovering above. One man seated to the prophet's left, right here, raises both hands, palms facing upwards, in a prayer gesture known as the raising of the 2 hands. Swaying back and forth, seated or raising their hands in prayer, the onlookers are engaged in a visually rapturous praise of the prophet, his physical characteristics, and his spiritual attributes. Theirs is a devotional meditation that engenders a visualization of the prophet seated in majesty under the protection of angelic beings that anoint him with heavenly radiance and scent. The depiction of Muhammad in the Book of the Margrave gains further layers of meanings when it is viewed in conjunction with another painting that appears just 5 folios later within the same manuscript. In this scene, an enthroned ruler is depicted in the composition's center. He may represent Al-Ravini's patron, a vizier active in the first decades of the 13th century, or else the unnamed sponsor who commissioned the author's text to be copied and illustrated in 1299. Although the sitter's identity remains unknown, he is clearly of a high, perhaps even royal standing. Perhaps much more significantly, the depiction of this royal audience shows undeniable parallels to the painting of the Prophet Muhammad within the same manuscript. Indeed, here both rulers, Muhammad on the left and a princely figure on the right, sit enthroned in an outdoor setting. Both are surrounded by followers and officials standing and sitting in poses of respect and praise. Although both paintings resemble one another in their formal structure, figural composition, and their inclusion of a floral landscape, they also diverge in a number of significant ways as well. For example, the kingly patron on the right is shown wearing a golden crown and a robe crossed at the neck, while his attendants likewise wear contemporary garb, as well as headgear and feathered caps typical of the time the manuscript was produced. Additionally, in the foreground, 2 courtiers are depicted sitting on stools with pillows, here and here. From the crown to vestments and furniture, these many details were intended to reflect ceremonial fashions and effects current in elite circles at the time. On the other hand, in the painting of the prophet on the left, the details are intended to suggest a distant past. The prophet wears his burda, or overcloak, and not a crown. His companions wear variously colored turbans and not feathered caps, and they sit or stand on the ground without the aid of cushioned chairs. Without a doubt, the painting's artist strove to represent the attire and etiquette current during the prophet's time, which would have been available to him through biohistorical texts as well as oral accounts. Conversely, the flying angels above Muhammad cannot be explained away as purported timepieces or else a pictorial exercise in accuracy to detail. Rather, their function transcends the purely mimetic to suggest a higher ontological plane of consecrated being for the prophet. In the Marzuban Nameh painting, as well as in others that were made during this time period, including this one in the Freer Sackler in Washington, D.C., Muhammad is depicted enthroned, as well as protected and anointed by the angels. These iconographic details all contribute to what we might call a symbolic discourse on sacral kingship. Put simply, Muhammad is visually imagined here as both king and prophet. These paintings of Muhammad as a divinely mandated ruler, as found in the earliest extant Persian paintings, must be interpreted in light of the particular cultural and political circumstances in Iran around 1300. At this time, the Ilkhanid rulers, foreigners of Mongol extraction who were beginning to convert to Islam, expended great efforts to fashion themselves as inheritors of the Islamic faith, as local dynasts ruling in the land of Iran, and as world leaders descending from the illustrious line of Genghis Khan. Their imperial ideology synthesized Islamic, Persian, and Mongolian ideas of rulership. Such conceptual combinations can be found in a wide variety of textual materials, including historical texts, diplomatic letters, and coins. To give just one example here, a number of Ilkhanid rulers initiated their diplomatic letters with the formula, quote, "in the might of the everlasting heaven and in support of the Prophet Muhammad." The term everlasting heaven, Tengri or Tengari or Tangra in Altaic languages, meaning also God. So God is the heaven. This Mongolian Islamic notion of God and his prophet can be seen as echoed within paintings of Muhammad from this period, in which the flying angels can be interpreted as carrying and transferring the might of a sky god to his chosen messenger. However, the pictorial rendition of sacral kingship, in particular the inclusion of winged angels holding ribbons above a monarch, has a long history within pre-Islamic Iranian visual culture, both in elite private spheres as well as in the public domain. For example, a number of Sasanian silver plates and bowls of the 4th to the 7th century depict investiture scenes in which a monarch sits enthroned while an angel or two fly above holding a fluttering ribbon. So here's an example from the British Museum of a king seated enthroned with an angel carrying a ribbon above. Additionally, royally sponsored Sasanian rock carvings using similar motifs can be found in the public domain. Take, for example, Takebustan, which is located in the Iranian city of Kermanshah. This royal arch includes a number of carved reliefs. The lower recessed horizontal panel shows the Sasanian king Khusra II as a royal equestrian mounted on his favorite horse Shabdiz, right here, while the top register here depicts the crowning ceremony of Khusra II as he stands in the center, flanked on the left by Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity of Zoroastrianism, and on the right by Anahita, the goddess of fertility, healing, and wisdom. Above these two horizontal panels are carved two flying angels, each holding a diadem and fluttering ribbons, the twin symbols of Sasanian accession and triumph. So here we have our two angels holding diadems and ribbons. In the Persian language, ribbons are referred to as dastar, which literally translates as purveyor of victory. Although Sasanian depictions of ribbons as part of imperial iconography antedate the arrival of Islam in Iran, the term dastar continued to be used in Persian literature for centuries, most especially within Firdausi's Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, which was produced as an illustrated manuscript from the 1300s onwards. Thus, the ribbon retained its symbolism as divine triumph. The earliest surviving paintings of the Prophet Muhammad from around 1300 clearly follow in the footsteps of the Persian iconography of sacral kingship, which was developed in both private and public spheres in Iran well before the advent of Islam. Images of cosmic rulers evidently endured well into the Islamic period, and such images, whether of a king or a prophet, tend to depict an exalted protagonist seated or standing who is invested with the right to temporal rule through God's angelic couriers bearing the dastar, a ribbon that functions as a visible material sign of the abstract concepts of sacred protection and divine triumph. As such, early paintings of Muhammad show the prophet imagined as a royal king bearing sacred attributes, and such attributes essentially comprise non-physical external signs, that is, ribbons, angels, flowers, and so on, that serve as visual stand-ins for his appointment, protection, and triumph under God. In brief, these earliest surviving Islamic paintings of Muhammad show him as both a leader of his community and the last messenger of God. This conceptual composite of earthly and heavenly rule is without a doubt refracted by inherited Persian artistic motifs that aim to bolster an imperial ideology of sacred governance for an elite regime whose right to rule was doubly predicated upon the Persian kingly paradigm and the Islamic prophetic example. Over the course of the 14th and 15th centuries, changes in prophetic iconography can be observed in Persian illustrated manuscripts commissioned by the Ilkhanid and Timurid rulers of Iran and Central Asia. At this time, the image of Muhammad as an enthroned and protected king disappears. Instead, artists began to devise new and rather nuanced visual metaphors that aimed to herald his numinous nature in particular. This development can be traced in a wide variety of paintings, but perhaps nowhere best than in two related historical texts that include chapters narrating the biography of the Prophet. The first of these is the Jam' al-Tawarikh, or Compendium of Chronicles, penned by the Ilkhanid vizier Rashid ad-Din and produced as an illustrated manuscript in the early 14th century. The second is the Majma' al-Tawarikh, or the Collection of Chronicles, written by Hafiz Abru, the official historian of the Timurid ruler Shah Rukh, who requested that Rashid ad-Din's earlier text be updated and completed. So the second text is an updating and a completion of the first. As a result, the Timurid illustrated manuscript of 1425 heavily draws upon its Ilkhanid precursor in both its textual contents and pictorial images, both of which have nevertheless been altered in several notable ways that help us track how Muhammad came to be imagined and depicted differently over the course of the 14th and 15th centuries. Although one could examine a number of paintings of the Prophet in these two illustrated manuscripts, today I will focus on only two examples that help highlight more general trends vis-à-vis the development of prophetic iconography. The two examples today will be the birth of the Prophet Muhammad and the beginnings of Revelation. In the Ilkhanid illustrated manuscript of Rashid ad-Din's Compendium of Chronicles, the biography of the Prophet begins with a description of the birth of Muhammad to his mother Aminah. This section comprises only 2 lines of text before the painting at the bottom of the folio, and none thereafter, in which the author simply records a statement by the Prophet's companions noting that Muhammad was born in Mecca during the year of the elephant. The equivalent dates are also provided in accordance with the regnal years of the Sasanian monarch Khusra Anushirvan and Alexander the Great. No Islamic equivalent years provided, most likely because the lunar calendar had not yet been established. The textual section on the Prophet's birth is thus exceedingly brief. Devoid of particulars and explanations, its only concern consists in establishing the accurate year of Muhammad's birth per two of the major calendars in operation at the time. So this is the only bit of information on Muhammad's birth, immediately above the painting, a detail of which is shown here. Despite the brevity of Rashid ad-Din's account, the painting nevertheless expands the narrative of Muhammad's birth by offering visual details that help fill in the gaps left ajar by the text's overwhelming silence. Here, in the horizontal register's central bay, Amina is covered in a sheet and reclines on a pillow as a midwife and other servant ladies tend to her. The newborn Muhammad is swaddled in a cloth, his body's contours and his facial features clearly visible. He is held aloft by one of two angels, the second of which holds what appears to be a gold censer. The censer is here, and I should mention this is a later inscription simply identifying the scene as the birth of the Prophet, so it's not an original inscription. In the right register sits an old man with a walking stick. This is most likely Muhammad's grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, while in the left register stand a number of women, including an old lady hunching over her walking stick. Turning to the Timurid manuscript of 1425, a similar scene of Muhammad's birth is likewise included in Hafiz-i Abru's collection of chronicles. The painting retains the horizontal format and its tripartite division, here utilized by a wall decorated with blue revetment tiles. In the center of the image, only a reclining Amina and two angels holding Muhammad and a censer remain. The lady servants that were included in the previous Ilkhanid painting have been omitted, perhaps to emphasize the centrality of the birth event proper. Unlike the Ilkhanid manuscript, whose text entry comprises only 2 lines of fact-centered information, the Timurid Compendium of Chronicles includes a much more elaborate entry highlighting a number of other details related to the Prophet's birth. For example, the text relates that when Amina was pregnant, she received a revelation from heaven informing her that she was carrying a blessed creature and the seal of creation, and that this creature must be called Muhammad, a name meaning the praiseworthy one, or the one worthy of praise. The text continues by recording Amina as having stated that she saw a light emanating from Muhammad at the time of his birth, which illuminated the whole entire world. Pavilions in the Levant were lit with his radiance, which rose upwards and reached the stars and the heavens. Moving past its description of Muhammad's primordial light, the text then discusses the signs of Islam's impending ascendancy at the time of Muhammad's coming into the world. Such signs include the destruction of all the idols at the Kaaba in Mecca, the extinguishing of fire in all Zoroastrian fire temples in Iran, and the smashing of the 12 parapets of the arts of Khusra Nushirvan. From predicting Islam's triumph over Arab polytheism and Persian Zoroastrianism to projecting the Muslim forces' military victory over the Sasanians, the birth of Muhammad takes on cosmic proportions, begetting a sacred and inevitably successful course for Islam in its Persian geocultural milieu. Can you press forward, please? Thank you. The Timurid painting does not address the collapse of the old world order at the time of the Prophet's birth. Instead, it takes up the theme of Muhammad's glowing light as it is described in the text proper. Here, the swaddled newborn, whose facial features remain visible despite a loss of pigment, is surrounded by an aureole which transforms into 2 large flames of light that branch out to the left and the right of the angels. So here's Muhammad's halo, and it branches out to the right and the left. The gold pigment is further emphasized by the bright blue of the revetment tiles in the background, a color itself suggestive of the skies and thus the abode of God. Through these pictorial alterations, the prophet's birth is no longer an outdoor scene populated by earthly personages, as is the case for the Ilkhanid painting above. Instead, his coming into the world is depicted as occurring in a quasi-celestial sphere inhabited by angelic beings sent unto mankind to announce the arrival of a pre-existent effulgent prophet. Such timid visual augmentations of Ilkhanid paintings of the prophet appear rather common. To briefly show another example of this phenomenon, we may turn to the illustration of the beginnings of Revelation, at which time the Prophet Muhammad was granted recitations through the angel Gabriel. Within the Ilkhanid painting, which you see here, and here's a detail, the Prophet Muhammad sits outdoors in a rocky landscape, his hands resting upon his knees. He has 2 long hair plaits, a beard, and a white turban. As he looks toward Gabriel, the crowned angel approaches him while pointing his index finger, a gesture commanding that Muhammad recite in the name of the Lord. This momentous event, which marked the beginnings of the Quran as revealed to the Prophet in the form of oral recitations, was also put to picture in the Timurid manuscript. Today, the painting of this episode appears on a single folio held in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and is thus detached from its original manuscript. Although inspired by its Ilkhanid predecessor, the Timurid painting nevertheless reveals a number of divergences, including most notably a brighter color palette, a thicker application of paint, and an enlargement and flattening of the rocky landscape. Beyond these stylistic changes, one last modification can in fact be detected, and that is the addition of gold flaming halos to both the Prophet Muhammad and the angel Gabriel. In juxtaposing these Ilkhanid and Timurid paintings of the Prophet's birth and the beginnings of Revelation, we cannot fail but notice a number of pictorial changes as Persian book arts developed over the course of the 14th and 15th centuries. These changes, however, involve not just style, but also content. In the case of prophetic iconography, new content is in fact Muhammad's flaming halo, a pictorial device whose philosophical underpinnings are expressed in a wide variety of antecedent texts. Within literary sources, the analogy of light is harnessed as a consistent rhetorical device to describe the prophet's more sacred qualities. In other words, to engage the viewer's abstract thought and pious imagination towards the constructing of the concept of the Nur Muhammad, or the light of Muhammad. The Quran itself mentions in several places a glowing light or a lamp, sometimes a torch, that writers understood as a metaphor for Muhammad. In a number of Quranic verses in particular, it is stated that God sent a light and a book to his people to lead them out of darkness. Exegetes interpreted these verses as evidence that God communicates with humans through his book, the Quran, and his prophet, himself embodied light indicative of divine revelation. Still other verses in the Quran, most famous among them the so-called light verse or Ayat an-Nur, were interpreted most especially by mystical thinkers as a metaphor for Muhammad acting as a torch illuminating an eternal tabernacle shining from the east to the west. And finally, many sayings of the Prophet further elaborate upon the concept of the Nur Muhammad, or light of Muhammad. To give just one example among many, the famous hadith compiler al-Bukhari recorded a Prophet's companion as having stated that, quote, whenever he went in darkness, the Prophet had light shining around him like the moonlight, end quote. Through the authority of their own particular literary genres, exegetes, biographers, and mystical poets helped fashion the pervasive belief in Muhammad as primordial light or luminous body derived from God's incandescent essence and emitted as creative substance into the world. These sustained efforts all coalesced to give rise to the notion of the Nur Muhammad. This, in turn, was furthered by Sufi practices and the rise of mysticism exactly at this time. This conceptualization, both exegetical and mystical, of the prophetic corpus stipulates that God epiphanized himself as light, which then manifested itself as the light of Muhammad, from which the entire universe proceeded into existence prior to the prophet's later manifestation on earth. Within the history of Islamic pious imagination, the concept of the Nur Muhammad thus highlights sustained attempts to go beyond conceptual literalism in favor of imagining what we might call a more metaphorical Muhammad. Such efforts in transcending the purely physical and mimetic are echoed especially by paintings of the Prophet included in mystical texts produced as illustrated manuscripts over the course of the 16th century, and perhaps nowhere more artfully encapsulated than in the image shown here. This stupendous painting, now on display in the galleries here at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, so you can see it from close proximity, appears in the introductory section in praise of the Prophet included in Sa'di's Bustan, or Fruit Orchard, a book that consists in stories illustrating the virtues recommended to Muslims, including prayer, as well as reflections on the behavior and practices of Sufis, or mystics. Here the painting accompanies Sa'di's introductory encomium to the Prophet, which praises his proximity to God and his radiant light. Within his text, Sa'di also asks how best to laud the Prophet, eventually bemoaning the fact that the written word and oral prayer will never provide a perfect or complete description of Muhammad's larger-than-life being. In some sense, the painting that attends this text seems to visually engage with and even offer one possible solution to this problematic by heralding the power of visual meditation. In the image's upper half is depicted Muhammad's ascension to the heavens. The Prophet sits on his human-headed winged steed Burak as he flies upward among legions of angels. He is surrounded by swirls of golden clouds, while a flaming halo encircles his head and turban, as well as Burak. Muhammad's ascension is often mentioned in the prologues of mystical works as one of his greatest prophetic miracles, through which he rose through the skies and reached God, with whom he had an intimate colloquy and from whom he was granted knowledge of the afterworld. As a thematic pattern, moreover, the prophetic ascension was used as a foil by mystics embarked on their own quest to go beyond the visible and earthly in order to reach Gnostic knowledge and total unity in God. As a tribute to Muhammad's highest miracle, and as a metaphor for the spiritualist journey towards the divine, the Prophet's ascension has been a prominent theme for representation in Persian painting both before and after the 16th century. The Met's painting, therefore, must have drawn upon a number of precedents, including, for example, the famous Timurid illustrated Book of Ascension, shown on the screen here, and other single paintings of the Prophet's ascent, which oftentimes depict Muhammad astride Burak and surrounded by angels. However, what is noteworthy about this painting is the fact that Muhammad is depicted not solely in the skies or rising above Mecca. Instead, he hovers above three men kneeling and closing their eyes in meditation within an enclosed interior space. One of them, wearing a red robe, right here, seems to have fallen asleep as he rests his head on his hands, while another, bearing a white beard, here, holds a rosary and seems to be engaged in deep devotional meditation. And here's the tasbih, or the rosary, the prayer beads. Behind the three men, and within a concave niche recalling the mihrab of a mosque, appears a Quran stand serving as a platform for the holy text, from which a bundle of light emerges, only to beget further gold clouds that reach into the heavens, thereby generating a light vision of the Prophet Muhammad himself. So overall, we have to read this painting in the following way: three cogitating men with a Quran emitting flames, and those flames then herald this incredible vision above. In the intermediary zone between the meditating mystics and Muhammad appear two inscriptions, here and here. Above the building's entrance door on the far right, the Shahada is inscribed within a horizontal frieze of blue panels, and the Shahada reads, "There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger." As a proclamation of the faith, this creed praises the oneness of God and the selection of Muhammad as his messenger unto mankind. The second inscription on the left continues in this vein, declaring that God is alone and has no equal. The painting's inscriptional contents thus glorify Islam as a monotheistic faith, herald the supremacy and singularity of God, and attest to the divinely decreed apostleship of the Prophet Muhammad. Its details taken all together, the painting seems to portray a dream vision of the Prophet by mystics engaged in deep devotional contemplation while sitting in a mosque. As such, it offers a symbolic completion of Sa'di's textual praise, which he himself bemoans as incomplete. With regards to dreams, the Prophet Muhammad himself is recorded as having stated that, quote, "One who sees me in a dream, it is as if he has truly seen me, for Satan cannot impersonate me," end quote. The visionary dream is therefore believed to inch closer to ontological reality, filling in the gaps created by the constraints of verbal expression. Within this framework, we can imagine that the painting therefore essentially functions as an external visualization of what is essentially an internal practice of pious imagination. In other words, the picture is intended as picturation. It is not a literal depiction of perceived reality, but rather a means to induce a dream vision. In the process, the painting calls to attention one of the paradoxes of the pictorial, in which a viewer is challenged to overcome optical perception in order to secure a quote-unquote real vision of the heart and not of the eye. Paintings of Muhammad in Persian lands from 1300 to 1600 eloquently suggest that a putative ban on figural imagery has not historically constituted the principal driving force behind the metaphorical and non-figurative elements used in representations of the Prophet. To the contrary, the overwhelming belief in Muhammad as a quintessential ruler, primordial flux, perfect man, and embodiment of faith compelled writers, artists, and devotees to engage in conceptual thought, and as a result to experiment with a wide variety of abstractions. Paintings of the Prophet are thus suggestive rather than directive, and invite an activation of the viewer's imaginative faculty in the service of both power and faith. And finally, they also challenge us, students, scholars, and admirers of Islamic art, today, to transcend pressures and presumptions so that we may critically assess, reconstruct, and preserve these pictorial traditions, which, without the shadow of a doubt, contribute in rich and praiseworthy ways to the artistic patrimony of Islam from its beginnings to the present day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christy, for approaching this subject in such a scholarly and enlightening way. And I'm sure we all know more now than we did before. Thank you. Now, we're moving on to the second half of this program this afternoon, where we will hear the Alwan Arab Music Ensemble. The ensemble consists of 6 of the leading practitioners of Arab music in New York, each of whom sings and performs a wide range of Arab musical styles on traditional instruments. They are George Ziadeh, who plays the oud and is a singer, Tarak Aboushi, who plays the bouzuk and sings. In fact, everybody sings, so I'm not going to say that again. Sami Shumais, playing the violin, Rami Al-Asr, playing riq, Zafar Tawil, qanun and violin, Amir As-Safar, the santur. This music that we will hear today will be coming from different sources, and I think that that's very much in keeping with the way we've organized our galleries, where we try to emphasize the geographical origin of the works of art as much as their unity within a kind of broader cultural and Islamic sphere. So today, this group is going to play a selection of classical music from Cairo, Aleppo, and Baghdad. And I just have a little bit more to say that you'll see on your program. This notion of classical in Arab culture, of course, has existed since the golden age of the Abbasids and late Umayyads from the 8th to the 13th century. This is a period when really very interesting, exciting strides were made in the arts and sciences. And in fact, while a certain amount of that was taken from Greek philosophy and Egyptian and ancient Middle Eastern cultures, also those ideas provide the foundation for many of the sciences that we know today. In this period, musicians and theorists developed a complex system of 7-note modes known as maqam, which lie at the heart of most Arab as well as Persian, Turkish, and Central Asian musical styles to the present day. So I think in listening to this music, we can feel a connection with the past and also be very happy that it continues to be played in the present and that we're here to enjoy it today. And I hope that if you haven't already, you'll have an opportunity to visit the galleries as well, where along with envisioning in places like the Moroccan court people playing music, you can also look at many, many different objects where musicians are portrayed. Bowls, textiles, paintings, almost in every single culture we find pictures of musicians and people listening to them, and everyone seems to be having a very good time. So I hope we do too today.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I thank all of you for being here. We are the Alwan Arab Music Ensemble. Today's program will consist of music from, as is mentioned in the program, Cairo, Aleppo, Baghdad, and actually the first piece we're going to play is Turkish. That wasn't mentioned, but in honor of today's discussion and the fact that we're talking about essentially a culture that is borderless, where ideas are exchanged, and certain things you can say are specific to what now happen to coincide with geographical borders, but essentially we are dealing with a shared tradition that centers around this idea of maqam. So the first piece we're going to play is Samai form, which is a common form found in Ottoman Turkish music, but it's been played throughout the Arab world, from Morocco, throughout North Africa, Egypt, and the Gulf, and into Iraq. And then we're going to continue with some other pieces which we'll introduce as we go along. And just briefly, this is Sami Abu Shumez on the violin.
Don't clap yet. I mean, you
have to hear him first.
George Ziad on oud. Tariq Abushi on buzuq. ضافر طويل عن قانون. Rami al-Asr on the riq and tabla. This instrument is called santur. My name is Amir al-Safar, and we hope you enjoy. Samai al-Khayyar. عمامي لو يشوفونك عمامي لو يشوفونك عمامي ويذبحونك ولاش عليا ويذبحونك ولاش عليا يا شبه الجمرة والخدود يا شبه الجمرة يا حلو عذبت السمرة يا حلو عذبت السمرة ويذبحونك ولاش بداية يذبحونك
وعيش الروح ملوش نهاية وإيه في إيدك لو طال النوح وزاد أسايا يا روحي شوف ذلي شوف ذلي وهواني حرام عليك حرام عليك حرام عليك هجرك ضناني قدرت تداوي الفؤاد وليه تسيبه يقاسي قدرت تداوي الفؤاد
George Ziada on the vocals. That last piece we played was an Egyptian composition by Muhammad Abdul Wahab, who was probably the most important composer in Egypt and possibly the Arab world of the 20th century, certainly most influential and made incredible strides in the music. And the form is called a dawr, which is a classical Egyptian form that was particularly, it was in practice in the late 19th and early 20th century. And the piece before that was an Iraqi composition called Dizzani Wa'aruf Marami, which the melody has been found in Turkish and other Arab countries as well. It's a very common piece. And before that we had two taqasim, one of George Ziada and Oud and one Zafir Tawil. Next we're going to play a maqam from Baghdad. This is called Maqam al-Awj. يا دوست يا جسد أشبه شيء بالخيال جسد أشبه شيء بالخيال وفؤادي عن هواكم غير سالي غير سالي. وعيون نفرت أدمعها لثغور نظمت نظم العالي سحرتني يا ترى من ذا الذي علم الأحداق بالسحر الحلال سحرتني يا ترى من ذا الذي علم الأحداق ورمتني فأصابت مقتلي يا سليمان ما لعينيك وما لي وما لي نزلي لمن جهانا يا دوست يا لفندي لفندي عيوني لفندي 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 عيوني لفندي الله يخلي صبري صندوق من البصرة الله يخلي صبري صندوق من البصرة يا البلام يا البلام جد من يا البلام يا البلام يا البلام جد من يا البلام بشريعة النواب جد من يا البلام غفا ونام غفا ونام عون الغفا ونام غفا ونام غفا ونام عون الغفا ونام بحضين ابو الشمات عون الغفا ونام لفندي لفندي عيوني لفندي 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 عيوني لفندي الله يخلي صبري صندوق من البصرة الله يخلي صبري صندوق من البصرة لردتشي بالعباس وانتم بالحسين لردتشي بالعباس وانتم بالحسين مصابيني من هواي بس دمعة العنا خيا خيا لا وصي المار ما يقبل وصية ما ريدهم ما ريد جيتهم علي يا دقة المحبوب دقة خز عليا والقمر تالي الليل دزيت ساعي والقمر تالي الليل دزيت ساعي يا نجمة شوفي هواي نايم لواعي يا نجمة شوفي هواي نايم لواعي خيا خيا لا وصي المار ما يقبل وصية ما ريدهم ما ريد جيتهم عليا يا دقة المحبوب دقة خز عليا يا دقة المحبوب دقة خز عليا Thank you. We're going to conclude this program with popular song Mwashah, which is a poetic form that was common in Andalusia in the medieval Arab times, about 1,000 years ago. And these poems have survived to this day through various melodies, particular repertoire that was born in Aleppo in the north of Syria, Halab. And this Mwashah we're going to perform is called Mahtiyali.
مولاي مولاي أجفاني جفاهن الكرى مولاي أجفاني جفاهن الكرى والشوق لاعجه في القلب خيما مولاي ولي عمل مولاي ولي عمل موجب عقوبتي فاحنن علي تكرما واجلو صدى قلبي واجلو صدى قلبي واجلو صدى وجل صدى قلبي بصفو محبة يا خير من أعطى الجزاء وأنعم. يا ليل يا ليلي يا ليلي يا عيني يا ليلي يا ليلي يا ليل. ما احتياني أمان يا رفاقي، ما احتياني أمان يا رفاقي، في غزال في غزال علم الغصن الغصن التدني يا عيني حينما الحين نال علم الغصن الغصن التدني يا عيني حينما ذقت شوقا وهو عني وارد وارد. يا جميل العيون يا كحيل العيون، يا جميل العيون يا كحيل الجفون، 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 يا جميل العيون يا جميل العيون يا كحيل الجفون، 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 يا جميل العيون يا كحيل الجفون. لست أدري هو موجود يا عيني أم دلال لست أدري هو موجود يا عيني أم
George Ziada on the vocals and oud. Tariq Abushi on buzuq. Dhafir Tawil on the qanoon. Rami Al-Asir on percussion. Sami Abu Shumez on violin. My name is Amir Al-Safar, this is a santoor, and we're the Alwan Arab Music Ensemble. Alwan for the Arts is a Arab Cultural Center, located in Lower Manhattan. We produce weekly concerts in the space as well as concerts outside. We have Marcel Khalifa, who's a legendary oud player from Lebanon, will be performing on April 29th at Town Hall. I believe there are flyers around, postcards for that concert, and you can check the website alwanforthearts.org for more information. And this group is the resident ensemble, and we do at least once a month performances either in the space or outside. So please stay in touch, and we'll be happy to talk afterward as well. Thank you again. Have a wonderful evening.